Good evening, I'm Pallavi Ghosh, and finally the race for the Rashtrapati Bhavan is going to come to a closure tomorrow when the polling begins from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. But what a series of twists and turns it has been. It has just gone on to show that the opposition is extremely fragile. This entire idea of opposition being united and coming under one umbrella has completely been shattered. It's also gone on to show that the BJP is a whiz kid when it comes to throwing up surprises. Draupadi Murmu is a many first in the selection by the NDA. It's going to be our focus over the next half hour to discuss whether it's changed and whether it will change the political dynamics in a run-up to the big elections of 2024. So it's going to be a big battle between Draupadi Murmu on one side, who is the NDA's candidate, and no guesses there as to the number she's going to be stacking up. But against her is the opposition's candidate, Yashwant Sinha, who in a last-minute appeal has written to all the opposition leaders and political parties that do vote for me, vote for democracy. So that's the pitch which has been put up by Yashwant Sinha and the opposition parties against the NDA's candidate. But let's take a look at Draupadi Murmu, who's the BJP's choice for Rashtrapati Bhavan. She, in fact, has many firsts which are attached to her. First of all, she's the first tribal leader to be the president of India. So that's one big fact which is stacked up in her presence. And this is something which is going to come across as a big surprise and perhaps responsible for the changes or crossovers which we have seen in terms of those who are going to land up voting for her. For example, the Shiv Sena, it may have been a bit of parting between the Shiv Sena and the BJP, but when it comes to the voting for the presidential elections, in a surprise crossover just days after the Maharashtra government fell, the Shiv Sena has decided to back Draupadi Murmu. This is to avoid any further exits. At least that is what the sense is, why the Uddhav Thackeray faction of the Shiv Sena is actually supporting Draupadi Murmu. It will also pave the way, will it actually pave the way for the return of the Shiv Sena to the NDA. No surprises in the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha or the JMM support to Draupadi Murmu, because after all, Jharkhand is a tribal dominant state, and for the politics of Hemant Soren and his party, it was important that he be by the side of Draupadi Murmu and break away from the opposition. Remember, they are in an alliance with the Congress party in the states. He cannot be seen voting against a tribal leader. That's the simple reason why the JMM has decided to go ahead and support the NDA's candidate. Murmu and Hemant Soren, in fact, are from the same Santhal tribal community. That also explains why it was very difficult for JMM to turn its back to her. 26.21% of the tribal population is actually in Jharkhand. So his political future rests on it. But apart from that, no surprises, but there are many other developments in terms of who's ending up supporting Draupadi Murmu. In fact, Sahdev Bharatiya Samaj Party, the SBSP, they have also decided to support the NDA's candidate. He's a leader of the Rajbhar. His also gesture is seen to be as an outreach to the BJP. Janata Dal Secular, ahead of the Karnataka elections, the interests are very much being kept in mind. So the JDS too has decided to support Draupadi Murmu. No surprises, because this is political reasons which is behind them. Also, in case of a hung assembly, he could have access to Rashtrapati Bhavan becomes crucial, and therefore they really have to be seen on the right side, which means the opposition certainly looks very divided and fragile. I'm just going to throw the floor open to my guests this evening to get a sense of whether there's going to be a change in the political dynamics inside, outside Parliament, especially up to 2024. Tom Vadakkan of the BJP is now joining me this evening. Dr. Syed Nasir Hussain of the Congress Party, Pratim Ranjan Bose, political analyst, Sanjay Kumar, Professor, CSDS and political analyst. I'm actually going to start with the Congress this evening, Mr. Nasir Hussain. Don't you think, or do you think rather, the selection of Yashwant Sinha as your presidential candidate is actually a story of a missed opportunity?
Pallavi, I don't think that there is any issue in the candidature of the opposition parties. The government did not take the first step to have a consensus candidate. Now, the government from its side could have definitely tried, especially when they were trying to put a tribal lady, they could have gone for a consensus. They could have tried for a consensus. That was not there. We were forced to have an opposition candidate, and opposition parties did meet. Yashwant Sinha ji, in his own right, he has marked himself as an outstanding statesman, politician, bureaucrat, and so on. And he is a known face in the country. He has been campaigning on certain issues which matters the people of the country for the past several years also. So there was a consensus on Mr. Yashwant Sinha's name, and we all political parties, most of them said that he should be our candidate. That's how we went for his candidature. And after filing the nomination, after declaring the candidature and filing the nomination, comes the NDS candidate. Now, there could be issues with certain political parties, because in a country like India, where we have elections in different states, where we have alliances and counter alliances in different states, where we have issues in different states, there may be one or two parties here and there who could have slipped. And this is not the first time that is happening. This has happened during the time of Pratibha Patil ji, when she was put up as a candidate by the UPA, when Mr. Pranab Mukherjee was the candidate for president the other time. Even when Mr. Kovind was put up as a candidate by NDA, they were cross-voting, or at the last moment, some parties did shift, both from the BJP's alliance, from NDA, and also some from UPA also.
Yes, yes, you're correct there. I remember that Shiv Sena decided to support Pratibha Patil, even though they were a part of NDA, because she, of course, comes from Maharashtra. Mr. Hussain, I don't disagree with you. I think Yashwant Sinha does have a right to contest elections. But, I mean, it's not that no one reached out to you. What stopped you from actually changing your mind and going ahead and supporting Draupadi Murmu? But I'm going to come to your response on that in a bit. Mr. Tom Vadakkan, you know, do you agree with Mr. Hussain when he says that the government or the BJP could have actually first reached out with the name to the opposition parties and ensure it's a complete consensus? Or is it that you did not do so because you wanted to have that political point later, look, we told you so, the opposition is anti-tribal and anti-woman. You wanted that opportunity.
Pallavi, that's not correct. We did that outreach. The BJP president was involved in it directly, talking across political spectrum to the top people of different political parties, but they had their reservation. There was this feeling that, well, you know, opposition would put up a candidate. It was like Hindi में कहते हैं ना, जिद पकड़ा, और ये था कि जिद है इतना कि भाई हम जो करें वो सही. हमने कोशिश जरूर किया कि रीच आउट करें, लेकिन प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि वो एक what you call, you know, the sense of revenge perhaps.
No.
हमारा candidate, opposition, unity.
अरे आप लोग also didn't vote for Pranab Mukherjee en masse, na?
No. Pranab Mukherjee was a different case. If you want to open that case, I can go till the program ends on that. Okay. But here was an issue, an outreach had been done, and the leader, my leader, the BJP president, personally spoke to top leaders of different political parties. They didn't come along. Then finally, we had no option but announcing the candidate. It was not that consensus happens with two sides, not one side exploring a possibility. But if there's no support, Pallavi, tell me, what do we do?
Okay. Okay, Mr. Bose, this question to you. is that do you think it was actually made more political sense for the opposition if they would have said, okay, here's a woman, here's a tribal woman, we have our own candidate, but doesn't matter. We'll give up our own candidate, but for the sake of these 2 points, because she's a woman and she's a tribal woman, we will withdraw our candidate. Do you think this is what the opposition should have done and at least actually scored more points by doing so? Or is it a zid, as Tom Wadekar is talking about?
Pallavi, in a very spinning track, what you do is you play on the back foot to give yourself more time to see where the ball turns and how the ball turns. So, if I look at it from opposition's perspective, let me assume that there has been politics. So BJP was doing its politics. So from the opposition's point of view, it was they who jumped up first. They took the first move. So you went for the shot and you just missed it. And then you didn't try to correct it. And now look what is the situation they are. Mr. Sinha, who has been in Trinamool, and he made the announcement first on Twitter.
Yes.
And today, we don't know whether Trinamool will support him or not. It's a funny situation. He's practically, I am expecting him to lose hands down. That is the situation. So how can they just blame it on BJP? They must know that BJP will do all tricks. So they should safeguard their position. What stopped them from doing that? So that answers your question that, you first fixed it that I have to beat. Now, what you are beating, you first know.
I know, I agree. Mr. Bose, maybe as a political party, the opposition party should have been more astute in second guessing who that name could be. And the fact is that Mamata Banerjee herself said it when she said, I wish they had told me earlier, maybe I would have thought differently. Though I'll tell you something, a very senior Trinamool Congress leader tells me that a maximum number of votes for Yashwant Sinha is actually going to come from Bengal. We'll have to wait for the counting because I think that's going to throw up even more of those revelations. And this is where I want to bring in Mr. Sanjay Kumar. Let's not get into whether they should have withdrawn or not. We have a name here of Yashwant Sinha. We have a name of Jagdeep Dhankar, which has been put up as a vice president candidate by the NDA, a Margaret Alva and a Draupadi Murmu. Do you think this presidential, vice presidential elections will go down in history and the race to 2024 as one which managed to change the political permutations and combinations?
I don't think that I would be willing to draw any parallel or take any lessons from what is going to happen in the presidential election and vice presidential election and what will happen eventually in 2024. I think we are talking about the presidential election. There are compulsions with several, parties in opposition. Even if they wanted to support Yashwant Sinha, they can't do that because of local, state level compulsions. And the other panelists have already talked about that. I don't think that the parties which are not supporting the opposition candidate in presidential election are not likely to align or likely to align with BJP when it comes to 2024. So I am not willing to draw any parallel between what is going to happen in when it comes to voting tomorrow for the presidential election and how the equations are going to be for the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Lok Sabha elections are different, presidential elections are different. So the equations are going to be very different.
Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, now Mr. Zain, I'm just going to come back. You've just heard what everyone else had to say. Do you think that in case Yashwant Sinha doesn't manage to get en masse votes from, say, the TMC or even from the Congress party across states, it will be a huge embarrassment and yet another, a mistake by the Congress party. She's a woman and you've always you have a president who's a woman. You've always taken credit for the fact that the first speaker was a woman, first president was a woman, in the sense of, Indira Gandhi and all these, when you go back on legacy. What really stopped you? Do you think there's going to be that sense of regret that, perhaps we should have defended Draupadi Murmu?
Pallavi, I think we have to understand that winning and losing are always winning and losing is always there in politics. It will be there in all types of election, from presidential election to an ward election. But what is important here is always elections are fought on the basis of ideologies. Here are two set of alliances, primarily two set of alliances standing for two different ideologies. So a contest was supposed to be there, but nevertheless there could have been a consensus in the national interest if the government of the day wanted. Probably they didn't want, they wanted to play politics, that is different thing. Second, when it comes to women, so when Srimati Pratibha Patil ji was put up as a candidate, BJP didn't support her. So that means that BJP is anti-woman. When Mr. K.R. Narayan was put up as a candidate, presidential candidate, BJP and the other parties didn't support. That means they were anti-Dalit. So let us not get into this rhetoric. This is not about caste or one woman being put up. It is more about the two ideologies that are facing each other in this country for the past several years. And this battle in this country has become very sharp. And there are sharp exchanges both within and outside the parliament. I think it is more of that. There are some small alliances here and there. As I mentioned earlier, Shiv Sena, when it was with BJP, they voted for Pratibha Patil ji, they voted for Pranab Mukherjee ji. When JDU was with BJP, they voted for Pranab Mukherjee ji. When JDU was with RJD and Congress, they voted Mr. Kovind at that time. So these type of one or two hiccups here and there have always been there. I think we shouldn't read too much into just because somebody is a tribal or somebody is a scheduled caste or somebody is a woman. We should all try and find a consensus there. She stands for a particular ideology and we stand for a particular ideology, and that way there could be lots of things that could have been spoken. I would like to today, though Mr. Kovind will not be there as the president after a couple of days or after a week or so, but I have not heard him doing any press conference where anti-Dalit atrocities were there in the country. He had never spoken or never made a statement earlier.
Okay.
And the same thing with the candidate of NDA today. I have never seen her doing any press conferences or anything. Anything when anti-tribal atrocities were done in Orissa, in Madhya Pradesh, in Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. Those were there. So let us talk more about ideology, not about candidates here.
Okay. Fair point. Tom, isn't it also a fact that when the BJP was in the opposition, they never supported many of the candidates which were also trying to send out a strong message? Why do you then grudge the opposition parties if they want to put up their own candidates? It's a political fight at the end of the day. It's not that if Draupadi Murmu becomes a president, they're not going to respect her office. They certainly will. Just as the BJP respected Pratibha Patil or Pranab Mukherjee for that matter.
Pallavi, the story of Pranab Kumar Mukherjee is something that you know very closely. How it happened, why it happened. I don't need to come into public domain.
Let's not talk about Pranab Mukherjee. I'm talking about the larger point which Mr. Hussain is making.
No.
Is that you people also did not support. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me complete. Now, I would like to know what Dr. Ajay Kumar said about the evil philosophy.
Tom,
now, let me complete.
I think I think Nakir Hussain has touched upon that.
By the Congress party. Do they have an explanation for that? Because this is not about ideology. This is about the engagement in politics with such a desire to downplay a tribal by saying what you say and then talking about, you talk about ideology. What kind of ideology this party represents, I don't know, and my countrymen don't know either.
Okay. I'll come to you, Mr. Hussain. Mr. Bose, should presidential elections then not be about this party versus that party? Are we actually sending a bad...
5 seconds?
Yeah, okay. Mr. Hussain, quickly, I'm giving you 5 seconds, but not more than 5 seconds, because I really have to go across to Mr. Bose. It's a little unfair you're getting out of time, but go ahead.
I think Mr. Ajay Kumar has already clarified. He was speaking about the evil philosophy, nothing about the lady there, nothing about the candidate of the NDA one. Two, Mr. Tom Vadakan is speaking about Congress ideology. This is the ideology whom he defended for years and decades, whom he defended. So let us not get into that.
Okay, fine.
Mr.
Tom, I'm just going to give you a chance.
Of your ideology,
Mr. Bose, do you think the elections are now becoming about this party versus that party, and the gravitas which is attributed to Rashtrapati Bhavan at some point of time gets compromised?
Absolutely so. I mean, it is very painful to see that, for example, the legacy of APJ Abdul Kalam, the most popular president ever. I'm not talking about religion here. I'm talking about a popular president, people's president. So, we could have, we should have done that. We should have sanctity. I mean, but that is an ideological situation. In that case, when from whichever party he belongs to, the prime minister also deserves some respect, the official respect. We are not doing that. I mean, that way we are making a mockery of the whole system. I mean, anyone can criticize, but look at the language, look at, not repeatedly, the other day some Bengal MLA has also said. So obviously, if ideally what you are saying is correct.
But Mr. Kumar, we are all talking about the presidential choice. I think the vice presidential choice is also very, very interesting. Now, here's the thing, Mr. Jagdeep Dhankar is going to be most probably the vice president who sits right in front of him. I mean, like I'm sitting here, just right in front of me is going to be Derek O'Brien of the Trinamool Congress. Of course, H.D. Devegowda, but I'm more interested in the Derek O'Brien factor because TMC versus the governor has been a perennial battle. Do you think the Rajya Sabha, with the vice president sitting as chairperson, is now going to be a shifting of the battleground Bengal to Rajya Sabha?
To some extent, yes. The reflection will be, we would definitely see the shadow of what was happening in Bengal in the Rajya Sabha, because we all know what has been happening in West Bengal when Jagdeep Dhankar has been the governor and Mamata Banerjee has been the chief minister. So some shadow of that will definitely be seen in the Rajya Sabha when Jagdeep Dhankar becomes the president of India, when he's heading the proceedings in the Rajya Sabha. I'm anticipating that some kind of...
Okay. I'm going to give the last word to Mr. Bose. Please go ahead because we're going to start running out of time. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we have to wait for just 3 more days. I think 21st TMC will take the decision, and there can be interesting decision.
I also have a sneaky feeling that I will not be too surprised if the Trinamool Congress actually ends up either abstaining from this whole process or in a sense supporting Jagdeep Dhankar, because saying, like, he's been a governor, so, we want to support, or rather word it differently and say, okay, we don't want to support. Because the absence of the Trinamool Congress today and the Aam Aadmi Party from that meeting today is also very, very telling. Mr. Tom,
absolutely.
Tom, I'm going to give you the last word because I know you will say I gave one chance extra to Mr. Hussain, but very quickly, do you think that's what could happen?
Yeah.
And are you hoping? Are you hoping that the Trinamool Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party supports you at least as far as the VP elections is concerned?
This is a simple question. This is a Kisan Putra. This is a gentleman who has fought and has come up from the bottom of the stairs, and he's probably the first educated person. And here's one person who is nothing connected with any dynasty. And if there is support coming from across the board, whether it's the Congress, it's the AAP, it's whoever it may be, point is,
but Tom,
this is about the
as
vice
the last
president
line,
of
just
India.
to bring back your line, what if tomorrow they accuse you of being anti-woman because you're not supporting Margaret Alva? But that's a debate for another day. That's all we have time for now. It's going to be interesting. Certainly, it's going to be a very, very interesting election, and I think it's going to have a lot of permutation and combination. But thank you so much, Tom. Thank you very much, Mr. Hussain. Thank you very much, Pratim Bose. And thank you very much, Sanjay Kumar. I mean, the last word is not yet heard as far as the presidential and vice presidential elections are concerned. But now we keep the focus going on Parliament because the monsoon session of Parliament begins, and it's going to be a long session, almost a month long. The centre is going to introduce around 24 new bills, and some of them are like the Cantonment Bill, the Multi-State Cooperative Societies Bill, and there are 2 separate bills for Constitution Amendment to revise a list of the SC/STs for Chhattisgarh and Tamil Nadu, which are also expected to come up. The opposition, of course, is all ready to raise multiple issues like price rise, the Agnipath recruitment scheme. In fact, they want this scheme to be rolled back, the unparliamentary words controversy as well, all of which came up at the all-party meeting earlier today.
Non-issues are being raised, and they are trying to portray the image that in India, even Parliament, we are not allowed to speak. They are trying to belittle the image of the Parliament. I condemn the attitude of the opposition parties, and I want to amply clarify that it depends on the situation and circumstances in which they are speaking, and on that basis, Speaker will decide. And these phrases which are brought out, these have been brought out by the Speaker, and government has nothing to do on that.
किन किन मुद्दों को मानसून सत्र में कांग्रेस और दूसरी विपक्षी पार्टियां उठाएंगी और किस पर चर्चा की मांग करेंगी?
इन्फ्लेशन का मुद्दा है, प्राइस राइज का भी है, उसके साथ अग्निपथ का मुद्दा है, उसके बाद जो फेडरल स्ट्रक्चर स्टेट के जो हकूक छीन ले रहे हैं उसका है, और जो मुद्दे जम्मू कश्मीर में जो हालात है उसके बारे में, और दूसरा वुमेन रिजर्वेशन का है, और तीसरा रिजर्वेशन इन प्रमोशन SC/ST उनका है, और प्राइवेट सेक्टर्स में भी रिजर्वेशन देने का मुद्दा भी वहाँ उठा। कम से कम 14 मुद्दे वहाँ पर रखा गया, उनका कोई उसको उत्तर नहीं आया, सिर्फ उन्होंने सुना और चले गए।
Well, that's it for me from now, but news continues over here on CNN News 18. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.